I heard this awesome quote the other day. Ships are safe in the harbor, but they're not built for that. They're built for the open water. I think that speaks to what we're going to talk about today, which is rites of passage. And we're not built to be comfortable couch potatoes and soft little, you know, evolved monkeys. We're meant to be challenged and pushed. And that's what our biology is built for, is these stressors to make us stronger, more resilient, so we could pass on those genetics to our children and great grandchildren.
Yeah, and I think this is why Jeff and I are so passionate about rites of passage, because I think if you want to up-level your life, you need to know that you can do challenging things and bridge those barriers of what you thought was impossible is actually possible. I was in this situation where when I was at one of the wilderness schools, and all of a sudden I was put in front of this massive fire that went to these really large coals. And our mentors, our leads, they said, okay, we're doing a fire walk, which meant that I had to walk on coals. And I remember being extremely terrified. I had no idea that this was going to happen. And we got placed in this moment of time where I met the fear of getting burned. I was terrified. I thought this was not possible. And then it was like, me, Dariya, like, I'm going to do this. I can do this. Of course, there was the choice. I didn't have to actually do it. They explained to us if we didn't want to, we didn't have to. But I said yes. And I knew that I could do it. And of course, I had to go through that fear. I had to go through that discomfort to be able to know on the other side that I could. And for those of you who are curious, because I always get asked this when I share the stories, like, I actually did not get burned at all. So I took 3 steps onto coals of a massive bonfire, and then was greeted on the other side by my mentor at the time, in kind of a puddle of like murky, wet mud. And and then I never got burned. And it was a moment in time that changed what I thought was possible. And I think that is what rites of passage do, is that we get brought to these edges of discomfort. And then on the other side, you are never the same person, because you know that you went through that event, and that means, like, what else can I do now, right? Like, how else can I up level? How else are my limiting beliefs just keeping me small?
Yeah, I think of something, and like, preface this, it might seem insignificant, but I spent a night alone in the woods. And this was during COVID. So this is after, I've had, I think, 6 fights, five wins, 1 loss, kickboxing. I've done all types of hiking, camping. I've camped near rattlesnakes, all types of fun, stories to go back on. But this was, I believe, January or February. I think it was February. It was still pretty cold out, snow covered everywhere. And I decided I had ended a relationship, and, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life. And this is probably like maybe 6 months before I met Dariya. And, I wanted to push myself. I wanted to know, like, okay, if I have to, I can go and do this. So I went out, no tent, no shelter. I had just, my ski pants, or like snowboarding pants, my boots, my jacket, and a backpack, and maybe like a liter or 2 of water. And maybe I brought like a protein bar or something, some little snack. But like, I'd already running on no food, and I just did this like on a whim. It was on a weekend, and I just said, like, I gotta do this. I gotta clear my head. And that seems insignificant, but it was a big deal to me at the time. And I went out there. I probably got out there maybe like 11, 12 in the afternoon, and I stayed till about 3, 4 in the morning. And I went and I climbed a trail called the Crack, if you're familiar with Killarney Provincial Park. And I stayed up there. I made a little fire, tried to sleep on a rock and a pile of balsam boughs. to stay off the snow. And, maybe I slept like 2 hours, but that was a huge deal to me. And that was like a rite of passage for me at the time that really um, helped me clear my mind and get some answers, but also, prove to myself again, despite, some people might be thinking like, I'd rather do that than get in the ring and get punched in the face. But, each person has their challenges, and that was one for me.
So there's a lot of examples. There's lots of ways you can cycle through the elements of a rite of passage. So the main three is there's the severance, the threshold, and then the incorporation. So some of the stories that we just said, like that was like really the threshold of the rite of passage, but there's always the severance piece of you have to let go of something. You have to surrender and kind of split from either this piece of identity or comfort or, these stories that we're holding on of what is possible. We have to let go of those before we go into the rite of passage. And I think what is oftentimes missed is the incorporation as well. So after the rite of passage, you need time to process that with a group of people in community. You're not meant to have a crazy experience where you're met with fear and discomfort and then just kind of go home without any integration or witnessing or celebration. And so all of our events, I would say, have an element, a thread of rite of passage, but the biggest one that we hold is our vision quest. And we really, really take the time. We have 3 days of every part, 3 days to sever, 3 days of your vision quest, which is the threshold, your fast, and then 3 days of incorporation, which is the last 3 days of the event before you go home. And this is having and honing in and honoring all three parts of the cycle of what a rite of passage actually is so powerful. And it's truly one of our favorite events to host.
Yeah, like is the most transformational for sure. And I think so many people have the call to some type of rite of passage, whatever it might be, like shooting your first animal with a bow or a rifle, like hunting, whatever it might be, like there's something out there. But definitely I would say like fasting and time alone it's got to be the most powerful medicine that we can really host with people.
Joseph Campbell says the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. And this is really important when it comes to the rite of passage. Is like there should be some nervousness. There should be this fear, because if you're not scared of it, then you've already transcended, you've already up-leveled past that. And so if if you hear any of these things and these things bring up like fear or discomfort, that is your body telling you, almost guiding you towards it. Like, oh, here's an opportunity to meet fear. Again, if you want to be confident and like fully embodied and walk through this world without anxiety or depression or just feeling lost in your life, we need these rites of passage to up level us. And it has to involve meeting fear and discomfort.
Yeah, and I think more importantly, it's set and setting, and it's how the execution happens. Because yeah, you could go skydiving, and you could do some, like me. I'm not gonna say that stepping in the ring. There's your severance. The threshold is the only way you're getting out is on a stretcher, or you're holding your hand up, or you lose the fight, or you give up. And most people aren't opting for the give up piece. So, yeah, that's friggin' scary. But a safer and more profound experience is going to come from something like a vision quest. Because you're going to have the time to unpack stuff. And, being up on that mountain in Killarney, freezing my ass off in the middle of winter, no shelter. Just like there's lots of times where I was like, what are you doing here, you idiot? But, when I look back, I was there. There was no technology. There's no signal there. When you're out there trying to sleep at, 1 a.m. on the side of a trail, you, you can't really hide from the bigger questions that you have, or your insecurities or your ego. And then you're faced with that. And at that time, I was like, what am I doing with my life? How am I moving forward? And then, you make room for those answers to come in.
And the beauty is that every single person will get the experience that they need on the rite of passage. So going back to my story of walking over fire, over coals, like some people did get burned, and not everyone's experience of emotional processing, of fear, of like the whole process, the whole cycle of that experience was very different. And yet everyone received the medicine that they needed at that moment in time. And so no one else can do this work for you. So this is where, again, you have to do this work yourself. And this is why Jeff and I are so passionate about having rites of passage in our programs, and keeping that culture alive in a culture where like it's pretty much lost. And I think that is one reason of why there's so many adults that are still living in a child archetype, is because we don't have in our culture kind of set rites of passage events to up level for maturity, to be of service, to gain more skills. The list can go on. So if you're interested in, going through a rite of passage with us, I would say the Vision Quest is our favorite one to host. And you can find all the information in the show notes for our program or on our website, findingpolaris.org. And anything else you want to say to close?
It's not for everyone, and we keep it very exclusive. There's not a lot of people. This is a very intimate event. So if you've got the calling, you probably know where to find us. And happy questing.